Okay, here we go. Okay, and we should be live. Welcome, everyone, to our Wednesday afternoon conversation with Robb Ryerse. My name is Kyle. I serve as Deputy Director of Communications here with Team Celeste. You will be seeing very little of me over the course of the next 20 minutes. I am solely here to help with Facebook logistics and comments on your end. So at any point in the conversation, please do chime in with questions, comments, concerns, and we will try our very best to get to those. We'll be monitoring on my phone, so pardon me if you find me gazing down every now and again. But let's go ahead and get things started. Of course, we are here with Celeste Williams, nurse practitioner and candidate for Congress in Northwest Arkansas's 3rd Congressional District. We're joined today by Robb Ryerse, a political powerhouse in his own right here in the 3rd District. You might recognize him from his 2018 bid against our common foe. I don't know if we're supposed to use that word, at least in this conversation. Incumbent Representative Steve Womack. Robb, of course, ran in the Republican primary. Since then, he has served as executive director with Brand New Congress and is here also to talk about his new venture with Vote Common Good. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor off to Celeste and Robb, and we'll bid everyone adieu in brief. Thanks again.
So, Robb, thank you so much for joining me today, and I really appreciate you being here. And I would love to just hear a little bit about Vote Common Good and how you got involved in that and kind of what you're doing with that now.
Yeah. Thanks, Celeste. It's so great to chat with you. You know, as folks, here in Arkansas's 3rd Congressional District might know from 2018 when I ran for Congress, I, like a lot of people, woke up the day after Election Day in 2016 just absolutely horrified at at what we had done as a country. Could not believe that that Donald Trump had been elected president, and essentially the 2 tribes that I'm a part of were like really responsible for that. That being the Republican Party. I'm a lifelong Republican. Couldn't believe my party had taken the country in this direction, and then also as a evangelical Christian, couldn't believe that 81% of white evangelicals across the country had supported someone whose character, whose leadership style, whose just fundamental cruelty to other people, so out of line with everything that I had been taught to believe growing up. And so, that I kind of lived with the sense that like I needed to do something about that, and I had no idea what that meant until there was a day that my wife actually listened to a podcast about this group that was recruiting people to run for Congress, and I came home from the office that day, and she held her phone out at me, and she said, "You've got to listen to this. You've got to do this." And that's what started my my involvement in politics. Throwing my hat into the ring and challenging Steve Womack because, as you know, he is one of Trump's biggest supporters in Washington, D.C., and someone who consistently puts the desires of the party establishment and the desires of his big corporate donors ahead of the needs of people. And he absolutely needs to be replaced for the good of the people of Arkansas's 3rd Congressional District. And so I, took my best shot at that, and that ultimately led me to getting a phone call from a friend of mine, who's a pastor in Minnesota, who said that he was putting together a group of pastors that were really concerned about Donald Trump, and it's essentially a recognition that that our tribe helped to cause this problem, and we needed to do something about it. And so, Vote Common Good is an effort of pastors and musicians and poets that are working together trying to change the narrative that if you are a religious person, particularly an evangelical Christian or a Catholic Christian here in the U.S., that you don't necessarily have to reflexively vote Republican all the time. You don't need to be a part of the religious right, that there is a way to express faith um, in the political realm that we think tends to be much more in line with the teachings of Jesus. And so we've been working since 2018 to try to stop the reelection of Donald Trump. We did a bus tour in 2018 supporting 31 congressional candidates in 36 districts. We started in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and went to Fresno, California, and on this kind of whirlwind tour. And now in 2020, we started the year doing a bus tour visiting all 50 states. We got to 36 states before COVID shut us down, and now we are back out on the bus doing outdoor socially distanced events in 6 key swing states: Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida, trying to rally religiously minded voters, religiously motivated voters to stop the reelection of Donald Trump, and in the process to support candidates across the country who are going to put the common good as their governing philosophy. We're asking people of faith and even people of no faith to use the common good as their voting criteria, instead of just asking, like, what's in it for me, who's going to give me the biggest tax cut, but rather than that, asking people to say, what's the common good here for all people, and how can we support leaders who are going to bring that about. So Vote Common Good is this effort to try to stop the reelection of Donald Trump by tapping into to disaffected, religiously motivated voters.
I think that's so awesome. I think it's so needed. Certainly, I think anybody who has been part of a faith group in a church knows that sometimes we can have some disagreements, and that we feel very passionately about those disagreements. And I think that, I think the church, like all human beings, because it is made up of people, can be flawed at times. And I think that it is that always seeking to do better. I think that, that takes all of us being willing to have those hard conversations with people that we care about, and to really hear what they have to say and extend a whole lot of grace to one another, to be able to really see the heart of what the person that you're voting for is, and to be able to support them. I am curious, you talked a little bit about tribalism and how one tribe helped create this narrative, and that you see that it is your job to help change the narrative. Do you feel like you're making progress with that? And what does that look like to you long term?
Yeah. So I think we are making progress. We have never had the sense that we're going to be able to turn all 81% of Donald Trump's white evangelical supporters. There's a huge percentage of that are going to support him no matter what, for a variety of reasons. But what we've thought is that there is probably 5 to 15% of folks within that group in 2016 that are movable, and what we've tried to do is create a space for people who have a little bit of regret for how they voted in 2016, to find a community. Those people who maybe in their family members, in their circle of family, their circle of friends, their church family, they're a little bit scared to speak up and say this. Oh, I'm kind of thinking this way, that I'm not going to support this guy anymore. We're trying to create a little bit of space for them to realize that they're not alone, and that there is a tribe that they can be a part of. We did some polling a couple weeks ago. It was really the most extensive polling of religiously motivated voters that's taken place here in 2020. And what we found is that overall there is an 11% move that Joe Biden now has an 11% advantage over what Hillary Clinton did with white evangelicals and white Catholics. And that's it. 11% doesn't sound like much, but when you think about Donald Trump's margin of victory in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in North Carolina, in Florida, it is 11% is far greater than his margin of victory in any of those states. And so we think that we are making a difference, and that we're helping people to realize that you can be a faithful Christian and not support Donald Trump. And our executive director, Doug Padgett, likes to joke, and I love when he says it. He says Donald Trump's like a self-cleaning oven. He does all the work for you. We're not trying to convince people like that Donald Trump shouldn't be president. Like, it feels like he does. Like, if you watch the debate last night, you just see like he's doing all the work for us. It's just, we're just trying to show people, hey, you're not alone in thinking this. You're a part of a growing tribe, and it's okay to speak up and to stand up and to say that, I'm gonna support Joe Biden this time around.
Yeah, I think, you brought up the debate, and when, I think it's interesting oftentimes to look at the world through the eyes of a child. And so one of my kids wanted to watch the debate with me. And so this morning he came in and asked me about who was winning right now. And I kind of told him what the polls look like. And of course, this is an 8-year-old. And he said, Mom, this is what I think. When I watched that, I thought that there's only one thing that Joe Biden can't do that Trump does. And I said, oh, what's that? And he said, lie. And I think that truth and decency is on the ballot this year. And, I think that it is so important that we think about what are the values that we hold as individuals, as people of faith, and certainly as Americans, that we believe in truth and justice and liberty and equality, and that all human beings are created equally. And I think that this election is certainly the most clear choice in just decency versus fear and demagoguery. And I think that, it is all of our jobs as voters to really delineate our choices. And then certainly as a candidate, I think that it is important for me to hold Steve Womack accountable and to really show how he has absolutely been a rubber stamp for the Trump administration. And, I think that it is important to adhere to the Constitution, and we are supposed to have 3 co-equal branches of the Constitution. And our legislative branch has absolutely failed to hold our president accountable and to rein him in and prevent executive overreach. And that worries me. And quite frankly, beyond that, I want a government that is a good steward of our resources. And, nobody likes to pay taxes, but we should all pay our fair share so that we can invest in the common good. And, I think sometimes when you say invest in the common good, people think, oh, well, that sounds great. I don't know what you're talking about. But, to me, that looks like, making sure that everyone can get the health care they need when they need it, making sure that we have economic and educational opportunities for everyone, and that's pre-K through a really good K through 12 program. That's making sure we have great vocational opportunities and making sure that college is affordable so that we're not saddling our youth with massive debt at the beginning of their lives, and so that everyone has a chance to succeed. And I think that taking taxpayer money and investing it in things that create opportunities and that make us all better and our communities stronger and safer, that's the common good.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree with you, Celeste. And what our polling found is when we asked people why they were moving from Trump to Biden, The thing that came up more than anything else, that like the number one trend that we saw, was that people are upset at how unkind Donald Trump is. There's a fundamental cruelty to him, and people, especially religiously motivated folks, are just really turned off by his unkindness, and what they want, and that unkindness comes through on his Twitter account for sure, comes through in his demeanor, how he treats the press, how he treats political opponents, how he treats other human beings, but it also comes through in policy as well. They look at kids in cages on the border. They look at wildfires raging, in the West, and because climate change is being ignored. They look at people struggling with, families going bankrupt because of health bills, healthcare bills. They look at the complete bungling of our COVID-19 response as a nation, and they see that, like, listen, this unkindness that we see this man project is actually coming through in the policies that are happening as well. And what we see with Steve Womack is, it's a mirror image of Donald Trump. It is an unkindness to people. It is using dehumanizing language, just dismissing the concerns and needs that Arkansas families have. A demeanor of, he's been called the scowling one by some folks in the press. There's just this unkindness to his demeanor and his policies, and the things that he wants to enact, that don't help the American people, that don't help the people of Arkansas, that make it easier for him and for his corporate buddies to make more money. It is fundamentally an unkindness that we see from leadership in Washington, from Trump and from Womack, that is really turning people off, and they're turning to people that project a concern and a care for other human beings and empathy for other human beings, and that's why Joe Biden's leading in the polls. That's why you're running for office, because people see that, like, what, we need leaders who are empathetic, who care, and who are, we might disagree on some things. Listen, I have huge disagreements on a lot of policy issues with Joe Biden, but Joe Biden has like a fundamental kindness that we do not see in Donald Trump, that we desperately need in our leadership in Washington, both in the White House and in Congress.
For me, I think about one of the fundamental values of who I am is that I believe that I am called to love my neighbor. And I think that is missing in our society and in our discourse. And you can love someone and disagree with them, but you don't have to demonize, like, the demonizing of political opponents, to me, is dangerous. And one, you're obviously not loving your neighbor. And two, I think that division really creates fertile ground for authoritarianism. And it doesn't take much of a stretch to look at what is happening every day in the news to see those tendencies, that reaching for power for no other reason than to obtain power, that it's completely unchecked, and power unchecked is corrupting. And if you don't care about your neighbor, which these policies and our budget being a moral document shows what we care about and what we're investing in, is absolutely immoral.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree with you. And I know, like, Steve Womack likes to talk about the budget a lot. He served as chair of the budget committee, and he likes to talk a lot about fiscal responsibility and balanced budgets. I would love for him to hear him talk about, like, budgets being moral documents, because they absolutely are. But there's like, the morality of a budget is more important than like whether or not a budget is balanced, quite frankly. And fiscal responsibility is important, but so is fundamental kindness towards other human beings.
Yes. And if you are being responsible and being a good steward of the resources that we have, and you continue to reinvest them in the people that you are serving, then we all do better. And when we're all doing better, that means that we have more financial stability in individuals and families as well. And we are growing our tax base. And then we have more money to continue to invest in the common good. And I think that he seems to be much more interested in making sure that multinational corporations and billionaires pay zero tax dollars. I mean, Amazon pays no federal income tax. That is reprehensible to me.
Yeah.
But, then that tax burden is then being shifted to lower income and middle income families.
Yep.
And we are hurting. And that is wrong.
Yes.
Everybody has to pay their fair share so that we can all have better. And you have to love your neighbor to be willing to pay your fair share.
Sure.
And I'll just stop right there.
Yeah, completely agree with you. Completely agree with you. Yep, absolutely.
Well, I would love to see if Kyle has seen any questions from viewers, if they have anything that they want to add. Oh, you're muted, Kyle. Kyle, you're muted.
I am muted. I appreciate that.
It's like the quote of 2020. You're muted.
I know.
Yeah.
You think after all these months that I have learned, but here we are. I'm looking through our Facebook and I'm not seeing any commentary as of current. Although, of course, want to remind viewers here that if you happen to think of anything in these final few moments, feel free to pass it on. But otherwise, I appreciated being in the background for this conversation. I mean, this was, I think, communicated the same frustrations that people from Arkansas have been feeling for decades now, particularly under the representation of Steve Womack. I come from an evangelical background. My parents are both active in the church, and I think the cognitive dissonance, especially from a youth perspective, is not lost on anyone. I think 2016 has been case in point. And so I am so curious to see how that fundamental unkindness that you both spoke to will translate into 2020. And it certainly was on display during last night's debate. So in the absence of any comments, would love to lastly thank Robb again for being here. Always a pleasure. And if there is no other final commentary from either Celeste or Robb, I think we can go ahead and wrap things up here.
Hey, Kyle, before we go, can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
It's one thing to be frustrated. You're absolutely right. And people, I think, desperately feel that. I didn't watch the debate last night because I had a little bit of self-care and wasn't going to put myself through that. Figured I'd catch up on anything, that significant that happened on Twitter. And so scrolling Twitter this morning, it was just, you could just sense the frustration that people feel. I just say this, that listen, let that frustration move you to action. And there's things that you can do. Like, you don't just have to feel frustrated, you can act. And that means having a plan to vote. It means donating to Celeste and her campaign and volunteering and doing whatever she needs to be elected. At Vote Common Good, we've got all sorts of ways that people can be involved. We've got a postcard campaign where we're targeting congressional districts in the key swing states that we're visiting, that people can send postcards to voters. We also have this great event coming up in October where we are hosting a national bake sale to benefit the post office. And so basically what we're doing is we're inviting people to, bake some cookies, bake a cake, make some pies, and have a bake sale. And instead of paying with cash, you pay with stamps. and the stamps are the currency. That way it benefits the post office by buying stamps from them. And then those stamps are going to be donated to organizations who are helping to turn out the vote and in nonprofit groups. And it's a lot of fun, and it's something that people can do. And so if people are interested in that, they could go to, are you ready for this? It's called Bake America Great Again. So you can go to bakeamericagreatagain.net, or I think also savethepostoffice.us. Either one of those will get you there, or you can go to votecommongood.com. But it's something that people can do in addition to voting, in addition to volunteering and donating for candidates like Celeste. Like, there's things that people can do that you don't just have to be frustrated, you can act. And now is the time that we need. In the next 30 some days, we need people acting and doing so that we can bring about the change that we need in our country.
I would like to have the final say, and then we can say goodbye to everybody.
Got it,
Rob is right. We have 33 days left. And I continue to say that nobody cares about Arkansas like Arkansans. And if we want better, we have to do the work, because no one is coming here to save us from the mess that we are in. We have to do the work ourselves. Truth and decency is on the ballot this election cycle. And if we are able to restore truth and decency to our federal government, then I think that creates a space where we can make sure that nobody gets broke because they get sick, that we can invest in a world-class education system and make sure that workers here in America are paid a fair wage. And I absolutely need your help right now. If you can sign up to volunteer, that would be amazing. You can go to Celeste Williams for Arkansas.com and click the box to sign up to volunteer. I think it's under Get Involved. And also, we recently filmed a great ad that we want to get on TV, and I am not independently wealthy. And I think it's very important that we elect people who understand the struggles of everyday people. I don't think you should have to be a millionaire to run for Congress, but that also requires that you also have some skin in the game. And so if you can help in any way, I would appreciate that as well. You can go also to the website, CelesteWilliamsForArkansas.com, and click the blue donate button. And you can donate up to $2,800 per individual per election cycle. But if that's a little bit much for you, you know, whatever you can do is so appreciated, whether that is 10, 25, 50, whatever. And that would be super helpful. And I appreciate each and every one of you out there for taking the time to listen to this conversation today. Rob, thank you so much for the work that you are doing, and it is deeply appreciated and needed. And Kyle, thanks for being an awesome little driver.
Celeste, of course, anytime. Great reminders. We are not without recourse, so let's get out there and do something. Absolutely. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop this live stream.